second. Okay, so thanks very much for coming, everyone. My name is Adam, as it helpfully says on the screen. I am one of the careers consultants as part of the careers team. Basically, that means I spend my professional life, at least, talking to students like you about all sorts of career-related stuff, and one of which is probably one of my most popular talks. This is getting a part-time job. Now, what I'm going to do, this is kind of, I'm not going to say basic, but this is, I guess, getting into the weeds of how to get a job, what a part-time job can do for you, some of which you're going to already know. But please forgive me, we're going to, I guess, assume that everyone in the call is a bit of a newbie. So I might be going over things that you already know, but this is to make sure that everybody gets up to speed and gets onto the same page. Now, as I said, and for those who have just joined, this session is being recorded and you will be able to get access to the recording and the slides. They'll be sent to you on Thursday, but in order to do that, I need you all to scan this QR code for me. What this allows me to do is see who's attended so that I can send you the recorded version and the slides. If this doesn't work for you for whatever reason, maybe there's a technical hiccup or you've joined on your phone, then there will be another way that you can get the slides just by emailing us, and I'll show our details on the screen at the end. But this just allows you to get it as quickly as possible. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, I'll show this up at the end as well. So if you're fumbling with your phone and it doesn't work for whatever reason, you will get another chance. Don't worry too much. This just means that because you're going to get the slides and the recording, you won't need to take notes. So you'll get all the information, all the links that I'm going to show you. So let's talk then about part-time jobs. Why bother? I mean, there are some obvious reasons, right, that you want a part-time job. More and more students, even more than we have ever seen in the past, are getting a part-time job for cold hard cash, right? You need money, you need to be able to support yourselves, and that's absolutely a really important part of a part-time job. There are other things that I would suggest a part-time job is really useful for. It shows a work history, it builds a CV, which is really valuable. It shows potential employers that even while you're studying, you're doing something professional, you are managing your time, you're juggling work, personal life, studies, all that sort of stuff. That's actually really worthwhile. And it develops skills that employers are actually looking for. And that's quite key to think about, because quite often, and I understand where this comes from, students will come to me and, let's say for the sake of argument, they're studying engineering and they'll say, I want a part-time job, but it needs to be in engineering. And the reality is that that doesn't really exist. Part-time jobs in engineering, medicine, law, these things, they might not exist, or they might be really, really rare. That doesn't mean, though, that a part-time job can't be really valuable, whatever career you're going into, because it will allow you, as it says on the screen, to develop your skills, what we would call transferable skills. So things like teamwork, customer service, communication, things that you can develop in any setting that you can then transfer to a completely different career, but it still be perfectly valuable, right? Anything can do that. Your extracurricular stuff, part-time work, your course, but part-time work is one of the key things that it's easy to see how that works. And in a lot of ways, part-time work can help you actually figure out things like, what are you good at? What are you interested in? So there are lots of different things that a part-time job is really valuable for. The money, really important part of it, but it's just the start, I would suggest. Now, having said that you can do any kind of part-time work and it be relevant, these, broadly speaking, are the things that our students tend to go into. So you'll see, I guess, the kind of usual suspects, right? Things like hospitality, restaurant work, bar work, hotels, retail, so shops, any kind of customer service, but also things like administration, potentially marketing, web design, development, even personal tutoring. And like I say, and I'm going to stress this a few times, I think, all of this is valid. All of this can be valuable. It doesn't need to be directly related to your degree or what you end up going into. If it is, great. I'm not saying avoid that, but just because your part-time work, whatever it is, isn't directly related to your degree, that's not a big problem. The fact that you have part-time work, if you can get it, is, I would argue, really, really good, whatever that part-time work is in. Now you will see, along with the typo, this is the national minimum wage at the moment, and it varies by age. Now this goes up every year, so this could well change in April, but for now, these are your national minimum wage rates. I only put these on the screen to demonstrate what you could be earning. This is your, I guess, absolute basic. If you see something with less than this, then that's what I would argue is a scam job, and I'll talk about those in the next slide. But basically, if you see something that's advertised at less than minimum wage, avoid it like the plague, basically, because that isn't legal. And that's a major red flag. A lot of roles, or even part-time work, pay more than this, which is great. Absolutely, go for that. Specialist jobs, skilled jobs, they can pay up much more than that. Okay, this is just to make you aware. These are your rates. This is what you should be aiming for and trying to beat in many cases. Now, I did mention scam jobs. Now, there could be any number of scams out there. We're seeing not loads by any means, but there's because things are hard at the moment, there's a bit of an uptick in the kind of scam jobs that we're seeing. Things that take advantage of the job seeker. So what I would suggest, treat all adverts with an element of caution. Just do a bit of a vibe check, basically. Think to yourself, does this sound legit? Avoid things like Gumtree or Facebook Marketplace or anything that's free, these free ad websites where people can post anything and there's no sort of fact checking or admin that goes into checking the job. I'd avoid those like the plague, to be honest. And before you apply to anything, Google the company, make sure it's real, maybe get a sense of what they're like with things like Glassdoor. And if at all you feel like, I'm not sure about this, then either avoid it, or if you want, you can check with us. Now, I will show our contact details later on at the end of the session, but if you're at all concerned, send us an email and we can advise you. But basically, if it feels too good to be true, if all you see are adverts, you can't get any info on the company themselves, it's probably a bit sketchy. So I would always err on the side of caution. Thankfully, that doesn't happen very often. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's not like you're going to be tripping over these all the time. This is just to give you that element of caution in your job search. Okay. Now, in terms of finding these jobs, I'm going to suggest that what you do when you're doing your job search, and this is true for part-time work, this is true for graduate work, but is develop what I call a rotation of activity, right? What I mean by that is that when you are doing a job search, you need to do a little bit of lots of different things. No one method of searching for a job is a silver bullet. No one method will guarantee you getting a job. You need to go multi-channel. And when I talk about a rotation, the idea behind that is that each day you will do one thing that's different to the thing you did yesterday. So your first thing to check is our website. Now, I'll give you QR codes later on to access this. Hopefully you're all aware of it, but on our website, we have a ton of information about how to find part-time work. We have a load of useful job sites and links. And through Career Connect, you can access all the vacancies that we as a career service are aware of. So that is going to be one part of your rotation. Okay, I'll show you how Career Connect looks in a minute. We have had a question. Hi, will we have access to the slides for the links? Yes, you absolutely will. As I said at the top, you'll be able to get the slides and a recorded version of the session sent to you, and I'll show you how to do that at the end of the session. Now, as I said, Career Connect, this is where we host all of the vacancies that we are aware of. Now, a lot of those are going to be graduate roles, so they're not all going to be part-time vacancies, but we do get quite a lot of part-time vacancies advertised through Career Connect. You can also set up your own searches and save them as email alerts, which I would always encourage you to do over any kind of job search. I'll touch on that on the more generic job boards like Indeed, Reed, all that sort of stuff, but you should definitely do it for Career Connect as well. When I talk, I guess, more broadly about job searching, some of you may have looked for jobs previously. You'll probably understand it can be a bit of a frustrating process. There's a lot of, I guess, frustration in it where you feel like you're searching and getting loads of stuff, most of which isn't relevant. A lot of what I teach is around how to take the sting out of the process, how to take all the pain out of it. Doing things like setting up job alerts can make things just a lot easier because you're automating one of the most annoying parts of the process. Okay. Now, this is what Career Connect looks like. Hopefully, you will be aware of that, but you'll see on the Opportunities and Vacancies tab, search all opportunities. That's where you can see the actual vacancies that we have available. So this is going to be the first part of your rotation. Okay. The next part of your rotation is going to be job boards. Right. Now, I'll talk about, and you'll be aware I slipped a slide, I'll talk about on-campus jobs in a second. There are specific portals that I would suggest for this. However, the generalist job boards they're a bit of a double-edged sword. These are probably for part-time jobs one of your most valuable tools. But unfortunately, that frustration that I talked about a second ago, that's one of the biggest issues with generalist job boards. The reason is all the generalist job boards, the ones that I've got on the screen, and probably the biggest one, which is called Indeed, they operate on basically the same way. They are all search engines. So if I put, let's say, I don't know, part-time marketing assistant into Total Jobs, CV Library, or Indeed, what that does is look for everything with the word part in, everything with the word time in, marketing, and assistant, and puts all of that, whether it's one of those words, two of those words, or all four of them in any combination, throws it all up on the screen. Which, if you've ever used them before, should be familiar because you start to think, wow, I've got loads of jobs I can apply to, most of which are useless, right? They're not actually what you're after. So what I'm going to suggest is do the exact opposite. Do not do what everyone else does. And instead, use what we call a Boolean string. Now, some of you might know what this is already. For those of you who don't, a Boolean string is a sequence of search terms. So that would be marketing, part-time, assistant, and then instructions. And I've got a few on the screen. So let's make it a bit more basic. Let's say I'm looking for a marketing assistant role. If I just put marketing assistant, it puts everything on the screen. That's not what we want. So if I put marketing and then and in capital letters and then assistant, it looks for that specific combination of those two search terms. So that's a little bit more powerful. If, on the other hand, I use speech marks like I've done there, so graduate marketing executive in speech marks, it looks for that specific phrase and nothing else in that order. So that, again, much, much more specific. And then you could get a bit fancy with it. So if I use and then brackets there, what I can do, graduate and marketing or communications. So I'm still keeping it quite specific, but I'm widening it out because maybe I'm thinking, well, I could do any kind of comms role or I could do a marketing role. I might put, what would I call it, PR in there. I might put all sorts, internal communications, comms. I could put anything in there to keep it still quite broad, but specific at the same time. And hopefully you can see, especially for part-time jobs, how this might be helpful. You could just put part-time in speech marks and find all the part-time jobs in and around Manchester. You could also put part-time and marketing or administration or retail or whatever it would be, still be quite specific and make sure it's part-time. And just to show you how powerful this can be, so on the right hand side, I've done pretty much what most people will do. Just put marketing in. And you'll see there 610 jobs, most of which, and I know because I checked, were just kind of useless. They weren't really marketing roles or they weren't graduate roles or whatever. On the left hand side, all I've done is book marketing and graduate, and you'll see 19 jobs. And again, I checked these, they were all graduate level marketing roles. And that's quite basic. And this is, I guess, one of your, I'm going to set it as homework, right? Go on Indeed after you finish this, do a little bit of experimentation. Find out what combination of instructions and search terms is getting you the most relevant and the most results. And then where that little purple square is, you can enter your email just for that specific job search and immediately automate that part of your job search because you set up alerts for that search. And immediately you've made what is probably the hardest or most frustrating part of your job search automated. And for part-time work, I'd suggest this is probably your most powerful tool, right? If anybody does have any questions as I'm going, because I am aware I go at a decent speed, please do put them in the chat. The next thing I'm going to suggest, and this is another part of your rotation, is think about the kind of company you are interested in working for. The type of employer, the industry, the sector. The reason I say that is because let's pick on engineering again. Let's say I asked an engineer, okay, what engineering firms are you interested in? Most engineering students would probably be able to tell me a few engineering firms, right? They might want to work for BAE Systems or they might want to work for, I don't know, Raytheon or something like that. After they get through like the top 4 or 5, the big companies, that's when they start to struggle. And you can do this for everything. And what I usually like to say is, all right, you can tell me the big employers in your sector. What about the smaller ones, what we would call an SME, a small to medium-sized enterprise? That gets a bit harder. And what I want you guys to do, and this goes for part-time work because you might target retail, you might target, I don't know, you might target marketing, you might target anything. But certainly when it gets to graduate work and full-time work, what I want you to do is build a target list of companies, and there's a really easy way to do that. So let's say I know I want to work as a project manager in construction. And because of that, I want part-time work in construction. Simple, right? Now, in Manchester, I can think pretty quickly of the big graduate construction firms. All right, how do I find the smaller ones? All I need to do is put construction Manchester into Google and then switch to Google Maps. And what that does is give you all of the local employers, big or small, for construction in and around Manchester in a handy little list. Now it's up to you at that point to do a little bit of research into them. Do you want to work for them? Are they interesting? Are they worth your time? But hopefully you can see how powerful this is. It helps you figure out who it is you want to work for, whether there are lots of employers in that particular sector in Manchester. Maybe, let's say it's engineering again, maybe there's not that many and they're all down in Bristol or London or wherever. So you know, I probably have to think about relocating if that's what I want to do. Or if you do want to relocate, if you figure out you're only here for a year or you're in your final year or whatever and you're going to move back home, or you know you want to work in London, then maybe do some of this and you can figure out what employers might be interesting to you. And then what I'd suggest, because you can't guarantee that all of their job adverts are going to be on things like Indeed or Career Connect, part of your rotation, you need to be looking at their recruitment websites individually, maybe once every couple of weeks, see what's coming up. Hopefully that shows you how, I guess, simple things can make this a lot easier. Now, there's a couple of other resources I'm going to highlight that I think could be really valuable for you. First one kind of does what it says. This one's called Student Job. This is basically a database of all sorts of roles that are directly relevant to students. So they do part-time work, they do internships, they do placements, they do summer jobs. There are all sorts of things on there. This is a kind of older screenshot. Last time I looked at this, it was up to, I think, was it 5,500 last time I looked? And it's always growing. Now, there are loads of potential websites for job vacancies. The ones I'm going to suggest, they're not the only ones that you could find useful by any means, and I can't suggest all of them for obvious reasons. This one I quite like because of how it is very student focused and it segments them out to things like placements, internships, part-time work. So it's very selective. You can really drill down and only get the things that you're interested in. And like you see there, it does it by city as well, which can be really valuable. The other website, other than the ones I've already suggested, that I like to recommend is a website called Unitemps. This is a recruitment website and a recruitment company that are just focused on roles that are essentially student friendly. So part-time work that can be interesting for students, basically anyone who needs that flexibility with your course. And on here, you'll find a lot of work for basically any kind of students, but also a lot of campus work, whether that's on Manchester campus or Salford or MMU. A lot of stuff goes on there for that. And in terms of campus work, because I did flash that up earlier, there are two resources that I would suggest. So the obvious one, I've already mentioned it, is Career Connect. Everything that we know that we're aware of that is campus based goes on there as a matter of course. But I would also suggest the Student Union Job Shop, because again, because it's set up by the Student Union, all the jobs that they advertise are going to be directly relevant and friendly to students. So they're going to be able to be flexible, they're going to be able to be fit around your studies. Okay. Now, those are the things I'm going to suggest you do. It's not going to be everything by any means, because there are going to be all sorts of other websites. I mean, just off the top of my head, things like LinkedIn can be helpful potentially. Milk Round can be useful. So there are all sorts of things that might be helpful. Before you get to use any of that, though, it would probably be a worthwhile idea to think about your CVs and your applications. Now, the CV that you use for part-time work is going to be quite different to the CV that you then eventually use for graduate level roles. They're not going to expect you to put loads of emphasis on your degree. It's going to be much more about your transferable skills, previous work experience, if you've got any, and other things that you can do. Now, we have a very specific section on our website that is devoted to how you can create a part-time work CV. I would suggest using that because, like I say, it's quite different and it might be more skills based. What you can do though, and I would advise this as kind of routine, basically, for all of our students, to be honest, is use the CV pathway. So I'm going to leave the QR code on the screen while I explain this. This is essentially a short course. It is a workshop that you can go through that talks to you about how to write a CV. So all the principles that go into writing a strong UK CV. Some of you might have one that you're really happy with and you've got interviews with before, and if so, great, you might not need this. But for most people, CV is kind of the thing that they need a little bit of work on. This can really help. And once you have done this, that then unlocks the ability to have a CV review appointment with one of my team. So that's where you upload a CV, have an appointment with an advisor, and they go through it with you in some detail. You need to do the pathway before you unlock those appointments. This just makes sure that you can go through, I guess, the basics, so things like format, spelling, grammar, to make sure that the appointment itself is spent on the more, let's say, complex things, targeting your CV, tailoring it. I should say as well, part of the pathway is the ability to upload it onto our online CV checker. That just goes through things like the basics, things like length, format, spelling, so that you can be sure that before you send it off, it is at a basic standard. And you can then have that appointment with one of my team to go through it in more detail. Okay, we'll move on. And just before I start wrapping up, I just wanted to touch on international students. Now, probably have some international students on the call. You have some very, I guess, specific things to think about. You definitely need a national insurance number. If you haven't got one of those, it's dead simple. All you need to do is either call that number on the screen or go onto the online portal where it will walk you through basically the application. And for international students, you have a hard limit of the number of hours you can work, which is 20 hours per week. The university advises 15, but if you want to go up to 20, if you think you can handle that, that's up to you, but you can't go beyond the 20. So you have to bear that in mind. Now, there are all sorts of resources that you can use as an international student. Obviously, with our website, you'll get all these links, so don't worry too much about taking them down. There's also UKISA, which talks about all the things that you have to think about as an international student. The big one really is the national insurance number and the 20 hours per week. But if you want any more detail, links are on the screen. Now, we have had a question, how can I find CV Checker? CV Checker is, like I said, part of the pathway. So if you scan that QR code, you'll go through the pathway, and to access the CV Checker, it is in the pathway. So that if you're interested in the CV Checker, do the pathway. It's an embedded part of that. Okay. That pretty much brings me to the end. So we've been going half an hour. That is the whistle stop tour of part-time jobs. It is very, I guess, straightforward. We've gone through that quite quickly, but it is that simple in a lot of ways. The big thing really is to start applying. Okay, so if you are at that stage where you think you can start applying, you've got your CV ready, use all the things that I've talked about today, go for it, right? If you aren't, then the thing I would suggest is come and see us. So the first thing that you can do is go onto our website. This is a repository basically of all the services and the information that we provide. You'll find information on our appointments, our events, and then treasure troves of information about different careers, different sectors, how to access them, how to write a CV, how to write a cover letter, all those sorts of things, obviously in written format. You'll also find a lot of our video resources on there, things like our YouTube channel, where recorded versions of all my talks are. A lot of that can be useful. So there I talk about CVs, cover letters, interviews even, how to actually find jobs. I go into a lot more detail about some of the stuff I've talked about today. You can also book appointments with us. So we have multiple different appointments that you can take advantage of. I've already talked about the CV appointments. You unlock that through the pathway. You can also have advice and guidance appointments. These consist of just quick query appointments where, we might just have a chat about where you're at, what you need, and maybe point you in the right sort of direction. Full careers appointments. Interview simulations. These are mock interviews that we conduct with students. If you've got an interview coming up, where we give you feedback then and there. And then career planning, if you have a disability, mental health or a health concern, all that sort of stuff. We also offer drop-ins. Now, I'm going to highlight the drop-ins particularly. There are drop-ins that happen in faculty. This is where you can just go up to your careers advisors and ask them any kind of careers related question. And in the atrium, which is here on the campus map, this is in the first floor of University Place, the careers desk is open every weekday between 10 and 4. You do not need an appointment. All you need to do is rock up and ask any kind of career related question. We might point you in the right sort of direction, maybe to another part of the service. But if you just want a quick conversation to figure out what you need to do next, please feel free, come and have a chat. Now, the last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up is just a little bit about the support that we offer you as an individual. whether you have questions about how your age, how maybe a disability or your sexual orientation, any kind of thing might affect your job search, your career journey. We offer 60-minute careers meetings for students with a disability or health condition. If you think you would benefit from something like that, then please do book on, come and see us. Okay? Which, ladies and gentlemen, pretty much brings me to the end. Last couple of things I'm going to ask you to do. So this is the attendance slide that I showed at the top. If you could just take the time to scan that if you haven't already. This allows me to send you the slides and send you the recording of this session. That will be sent out on Thursday. Okay, so that is sent out in a bulk email I think it's Thursday afternoon. So you wait until then before you get a bit worried that maybe it hasn't worked or whatever. If you get to Friday, you haven't had the slides, you've checked your spam filter or whatever else, then what I would suggest you do is email us and ask for the slides. And that's absolutely fine. I will put our email on the screen at the very end. And then the last thing I am going to ask you to do is if you could all just scan that QR code for me, if you would. That is a link to our feedback survey. We'd be really grateful if you could just let us know how you felt the session went. Now, we have had a couple of questions. Someone said I can't scan, but would like to have the slides. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to put our email address in the chat. If you email us at careers.info@manchester.ac.uk, it should come up on the chat now. Then we will respond to you with the slides probably in the same day or at least the next working day. And then someone's mentioned on-campus jobs. So you may have missed that, but so on-campus jobs, everything that we're aware of as an on-campus job, everything that's advertised that we know of goes on to Career Connect. The other one that I would suggest looking at for on-campus jobs is the Student Union Job Shop. Okay. Oh, that's not worked. That's not gone to everybody. Sorry about that, everyone. So if you want to, in fact, no, what I'll do, if you, for whatever reason, the QR codes aren't working for you, if you email us at careers.info@manchester.ac.uk, and we'll get back to you with the slides and the recording. Once you've done all that, everybody, you're free to go. I really hope that's been helpful. Thank you very much for coming. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'm more than happy to get back to you. Otherwise, you're free to go. Thank you very much, guys.